All right. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Today I have to talk to you about an addiction. One that has been crippling me lately, taking up all of my time off stream and partially on stream. It is called Against the Storm, and it has just absolutely captured me. It is by far the best PvE strategy game experience I've ever had. It is basically like Frostpunk and Northgard had a baby, I think is what someone described it as to me, and I was like, that is actually the perfect description of this game. But it doesn't really do it justice because it's like it takes the best aspects of those games and some other like resource management, supply chain games and all sorts of things, takes the best aspects of so many, blends them into this one very unique package. At its core, it is a roguelite survival city builder. The whole story essentially is you're venturing forth into this fantasy world of torrential rain and frequent blight storms, going out from your citadel in the mountains to try and gain a foothold in this harsh and unforgiving climate. Now, you start like any other city builder, you harvest resources, you attract new people to your settlement, and you struggle, of course, to keep the fires burning, bellies fed, and try to stop your people from losing trust and just abandoning your city in droves. The core gameplay is a balancing act between expanding as quickly as possible to secure new resources and grow your settlement, versus finding ways to stop the dark energies of the forest rebelling against your presence. If you expand too fast, you can trigger extreme hostility from the forest and get destroyed by brutal effects during the storms. But if you expand too slow, your settlement will stagnate and you'll run low on resources and your people could starve or lose hope and leave your settlement. This creates an incredibly satisfying game flow where you're pressed to expand and grow to increase your settlement's prowess, but you're also punished if you overreach and aren't quite ready to deal with the dangerous events and increased hostility that comes with it. Your choice of buildings is randomized in this game, so every mission you're forced to adapt to the limited building choices you've been given. Resource and supply management is one of the key mechanics in this game, the key things you're meant to focus on, and the special twist in Against the Storm is the recipe system. So basically, instead of resources being, a single use, any ingredient in the game can always be substituted with 1 to 4 alternative ingredients depending on the use it's being used for. This means you're never locked behind needing one specific answer to a problem, which in a game of randomly generated maps, random building unlocks, random rewards, it's really necessary to avoid never feeling like you're completely stuck with a certain answer to a situation just not being available. In fact, a lot of the game when you're first learning it is you think, oh, I solved this problem with this in the last game. You go to do that, you realize I don't have access to those resources, and you have to kind of muddle around in the recipe system and figure alternate solutions to problems based on the climate, the biome, and the resources that you've got. So there's this constant feeling of having to adapt your focus and your build and tailor it to the situations that naturally arise. And that's different every single game because of the way the playthroughs happen and the random generation. So what makes this game feel so damn good? For me, it's the fact that there's so many paths to victory. They're completely different, but they're all very difficult. This allows the game to feel creative without being a walk in the park. So it's actually incredibly brutal at times, right? In the past with games like Frostpunk 1, I find there's always a process I have with these sort of deep city builders where I struggle, I run into walls, go, oh, what the hell, how does this work? And then I Google and I study and I examine the tooltips and I learn the deep mechanics and the details of how that works in a game. I then strategize ways to min-max those mechanics, go back, try again, and I win. The problem is, in many of these games, they fall into the trap of there often being choices that are just so much better than the other choices that it's not really a choice, it's just kind of a knowledge check. I remember realizing in Frostpunk 1 that the hunting camps were just obscenely inefficient. On higher difficulties, you literally could not rely on them. You had to rush a scouting beacon and rely on massive food pickups on the world map to feed you until you unlocked higher food production techs. You kind of needed just this form of knowledge, right? Of there's massive food on the map. It always generates. That's actually how you get food. And I think finding hidden details like that can actually feel good in isolation. Oh, you need to know this little thing about the game. But if a game has too many of these noob traps where you would only pick a certain option when you first start out, it can feel like it doesn't let you express your creativity as much on harder difficulties. And due to limited options, it loses replayability. I've tried to go back on the harder difficulties of Frostpunk and say, let's see if I can make a hunting camp build work. It's just not possible. It's just, the hunting camps are just a very bad, useless tech. And it's actually, scouting the map is actually what feeds you. So there's kind of this almost opaque decision there that you just need to basically learn the optimal one and memorize that flowchart, because that is the flowchart to victory. What I like, on the other hand, about Against the Storm is there are these insanely powerful choices you can take that won't pay off for a while versus choices that give immediate payoff but are uninspiring in the long run. So both are very valid and they're enjoyable. They direct your gameplay in dramatically different directions though. So it feels like, hey, I could immediately get, oh look, I can get a trickle of income here, for instance. I can get +3 clay a minute, that's great. Passive income, not bad. Terrible later on when your settlement's big, it is completely unnoticeable. But early on, that's, you know, a nice little boost. So do I want to just give myself a boost to make the early game easier, get my settlement going? Or do I want to gamble on being able to get this insane bonus later? If I get like plus 10 jerky for making 10 biscuits as one of the recipe books you can get as one of these perks, that relies on like 4 different things happening that you don't know you'll be able to pull off, but if you put a lot of attention towards it, you probably can pull off later in the game, right? You're like, I need crops that I can then make into flour. I need a building that can make that flour. I then need a building that can also cook that flour into these biscuits. And then we're going to get this to pay off many steps down the line. That, of course, there's a bit of, ooh, will I get access to the random choices to make this happen? Number 1, the random resources to make it happen. Number 2, and will I even remember and keep my brain focused on this very long-term game plan while dealing with all the other problems that are popping up? And that's cool because it gives you these different choices. And the game is just littered with choices like this, where you can go short term, you can go long term, you can go medium term. There are so many different ways you can play this game, and they all feel like they have their own merits. Now, in many deep city builders and strategy games, this can actually be overwhelming, having all those decisions. What I do like about this game as well is there is a fantastic set of the missions that get given to you, and you always pick from one of 2 with each one. They're steadily given to you throughout your playthrough, they unlock over time, and they naturally guide you towards focusing on certain goals. So the great thing is you never need to finish them. You can just leave it unfinished if you don't happen to get the right resources or buildings to do it, you know, or you end up kind of changing path with your city and going in a different direction. But you actually are just encouraged to follow them, and they give you these really simple, easy goals. So at a point when you're learning a strategy game and you're going, I have 50 different things I can do, having this thing say, hey, you know, get some grain or send some money off to the citadel. It gives you a very clear focus on, okay, that's what I need to solve. And it just allows you to put your blinders on in an otherwise very complex learning environment. Now, the progression outside of each mission is also really good. So not only do you have progression inside the missions with all these roguelike aspects and unlocks, you've also got your buildings don't start all unlocked, right? You can still find every building on the map as a ruin and salvage it, but essentially it keeps the map, the building pool is like, I think about half of the buildings you have available to at the very start of the game, and that unlocks over time. So it already feels like a crazy amount of choices you have with the buildings, but it actually does a good job of keeping the game not as overwhelming, and of course giving you that satisfaction of, oh, I've unlocked a new building, that goes into the pool of different options that I could pick from. This is awesome. There's also incremental general upgrades, give you small like villager speed boosts and these sort of things. You can also get upgrades that give you options from traders and rewards, and this sort of just overall progression, different starting loadouts on missions. You know, you can embark with different creatures and different resources you take with you, as well as different cornerstones and things that are available. It just allows you to feel like no matter what happens with an individual settlement, fail or succeed, over time you do have just this slow, gradual progression that just gives you that satisfaction and feeling like you're working towards something. Another factor that makes the replayability and the uniqueness of single settlement you make in this game amazing is the different biomes and modifiers. So as you go around the world map, there's like different modifiers in different regions that like completely change the effect. Oh, you get more wood here, but your people work slower during the certain season or whatever, right? Or you go into a certain biome and, you know, you come from the woodlands, you're used to getting all these secondary resources, like you get insects and resin out of the trees when you're harvesting wood as a bonus resource that you get a little bit of along with the wood. Well, in this one, you don't get that. You get eggs and something else. And this creates just a very different game flow where you realize you've developed a build and an understanding of how to solve a certain biome. Depending on a certain set of buildings you go into a completely different biome, you get a completely different set of buildings, and it's like you're constantly learning the game and then having your knowledge somewhat reset for the new system. So you're really forced to build this like holistic understanding of all the different mechanics in the game. So every time you feel like you've mastered something, you've only mastered that little section of the game, and then the next settlement's going to give you new challenges and new choices, and that to me just, it tickles my brain. It feels like I'm constantly learning to understand things on a deeper level. Last but not least, the roguelike aspect of the game is incredibly well done and satisfying. I've basically realized recently that randomized choices are different. If they're different in every game run, it's just a fun mechanic. I've really been enjoying this in Mecha Bellum recently as a multiplayer auto-battler strategy game. But for me, I think it's just I have an addictive, gambling-prone sort of personality. For me, if I can get out that sort of gambling, ooh, that anticipation, what am I going to get? What am I going to get? That sort of thing, it tickles that part of my brain when you have these roguelike aspects. It gets me so excited kind of every time I get a new cornerstone or a new reward or I pick a new building and going, ooh, not only is there the anticipation, the excitement of which one I get, but then I get to pick one as well and then adjust my whole city and plan to those options that I get, and I can you kind of steer your settlement one way, you get different options and you change paths and go back. And for me, there's something incredibly satisfying about strategy games that push you towards being rewarded for being mentally flexible. That to me is just peak strategy gaming. Okay, so as we draw to the end of me gushing over this current addiction, let's talk about reasons you might not like this game. Especially if you haven't played games like Northgard, Frostpunk, or they weren't for you, that would be a big indicator this game might not be for you. But essentially, if you're not into games with complex resource management, you probably will not like Against the Storm. If you don't like games with randomness, you probably won't like Against the Storm. If you don't like pausing to think and plan, also probably not going to be for you. On that last point though, as I actually learn the game more, I'm super excited to go from being paused about 80% of the game, giving orders and kind of scratching my chin, figuring out how to play. I am looking to shift it to more of an RTS experience where I'm going to start playing soon with less pausing, and then I'm going to start playing with no pausing, except when the options come up, the roguelite aspects, right? Because you want to pause and think about that. I don't want to feel rushed on my roguelite choice. There'll be like naturally pauses once in a while to pick a choice, and then bam, everything else is real time, no pausing, and I'm sure I'm going to make a lot of mistakes. I might even have to lower the difficulty to make this work. But for me, when you master a city builder, going from the pause, play, slowly figuring out mechanics to playing it like a real-time experience where there's a lot more mistakes that are made, which forces even more unpredictability, and like you have to like recover from mistakes you've made and stuff, that always makes it a peak experience. Because once you master a city builder or strategy game too much, it always becomes a bit too simple if you play constantly paused and optimizing every decision. And for me, I think I enjoy having to solve mistakes and chaotic situations a little bit more. It just adds that little, I love real-time gaming, right? I love real-time strategy games. So I think this is going to make it a really fun real-time game. But you'd need to put in a lot of work to make it that way. Or if you played it that way from scratch, you would probably need to play on a much easier difficulty, and it would be very hard for you to take the time to like pause and go Google things to understand how mechanics works. Because that's how I play any deep strategy game. When I'm first learning it, I am tabbing out to Google things constantly. Anyway, I love the game. I'm addicted. I made a pact basically with myself to my audience. I said, if I'm addicted to a game and playing it all the time and it's stopping me from uploading more, of the regular content, I should at least talk about that game and try to understand why it's so addictive and fun, and hopefully share with you that so you can try it out if you're interested at all. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time. Goodbye and good night.